Hello, friends. Happy 60th anniversary, United Church of Hayward. How I wish I could be with you today to celebrate in person, but thankfully, through the magic of video and thankfully for the support from Reverend Jeannie, my friend Jeannie, and from Steve, we're able to make this happen. Hopefully, all the technology will work out. I've been trying to figure out how on earth to celebrate the 10 years we had together. There's so many memories, so many things to reflect upon. And I ended up coming up with 3 stories that the Holy Spirit suggested might be good to share today. So I hope there's something in one of these stories for you, both as you look back and as you look into the future to see what's coming. The first story comes from the very early days when I was with you, I think in the first couple of months. I was at the clergy group of UCC pastors in Southern Alameda County, and we had received word from the National UCC Church headquarters that they were looking for a UCC church somewhere close to Newark to be the face of the United Church of Christ in the wake of attacks on the transgender community in the wake of the murder of Gwen Araujo. We knew that Fred Phelps's family was going to be there and engaging in demonstrations and using God language to punish and to hurt. And the UCC was hopeful that there would be UCC communities nearby who could stand up and bring a liberating, loving message. Unfortunately, all my colleagues were going through something major at the time, and no one was available to commit to that. So they all turned to me and they said, "Well, you're at the Hayward Church. It's open and affirming. How about your church taking the lead out?" Now, I'd only been with UCH for a very brief period of time. I think it was just a matter of months. And while I knew it was an open and affirming church, I wasn't sure how open you were to being engaged in transgendered rights. I knew you'd had a history of being politically active, but didn't know where you were at that point. And so I brought it to the monthly planning meeting and I said, "Here's the situation. What do you think we should do?" And the room was kind of quiet for a while and there might have been a little bit of discussion, but everything changed when one person spoke. A very strong personality in the congregation in those days, Mr. Eric Nystrom. And I think he stood up to say this and he said, "Well, I don't know a trans this from a trans that, but I sure as bleep know what hate is, and hate is what killed that young person. I think we should do something." It was so beautifully clear that we all agreed that we should do something. And so I called the national office and one thing led to another. And we became very involved. Our little tiny aging church became very involved in transgendered rights. And it was in that very early moment of our ministry together that I thought, oh my goodness, I don't think this congregation's going to die. I think God has some really important work for this little church to do. Of course, over the years, we found many different ways to respond to the needs of our neighbors, worked with a lot of agencies, just responded to the situations that rose up. So that social justice DNA, but doing it out of real compassion, I know continues to this day. Another story that really I hold close, which might be one that will surprise you, that was when we had decided that the time had come to do more fundraising. And there were some folks in the church who suggested we have a craft fair because we have a lot of talented people in the congregation, a lot of good cooks. It kind of made sense. So plans were underway many months out to have a craft fair. And others of us were realizing that there were a number of new widows in the congregation. We just had a number of memorial services. And a lot of us were really worried about how they were going to go through this first holiday season without their beloved husbands. And someone, I think I know who it is, but I can't remember for sure, suggested, what if we had a daytime craft activity time for people who are retired? And if anybody wants to come, they can come to craft time, make things for the craft fair, but also socialize and be with one another. And I have no doubt that those afternoon craft work days, I think it was one day a week, maybe twice a week, when women got together and made things to support the church, to support the church's ministry, they also supported each other. And they also reframed the holiday season from a time to celebrate and grieve who wasn't there to a time to do something to honor God by supporting our little church. So that was beautiful. loved it. But it wasn't until the very first day of the craft fair, which was on a Saturday, that I realized that something absolutely magical was taking place. We had set up the sanctuary, and I think you still do this, so that the craft tables were around the sanctuary, and then in the middle of the room were little tables and chairs, and people could buy food and drink, and they could sit for a while and then shop a little bit more. So I noticed that members of the church periodically would go and sit with somebody. Sometimes it would be someone they knew, a neighbor or a family member, but more often than not, they were sitting with total strangers. You guys were sitting with total strangers and just being with them. And while there were some people who came in and shopped and left, there were other people who came in and they would sit down at one of those tables. And a person with great compassion would come and sit and listen to their story, maybe get them a free piece of cake or coffee. And then sometimes they would shop and sometimes they would just leave, but their hearts, their lives, their need to be seen had occurred. And that's when I realized that little craft fair, if it didn't make a penny, had already been successful ministry. So that's a very dear memory I hold with me, and it reminds me that whatever church I'm serving, if we're getting ready to do an event and we have a very specific idea in mind about why we're doing it, to also be very calm and to watch and see what else God is doing with that event. Again, I'm going to have to skip over so many stories, which feels so unfair, but the last story I want to share comes from our last couple of months together. I think it was toward the very end of my ministry with you. And it's a memory that comes out as fruit for things that had been going on for a while. Over the course of our 10 years together, we did indeed form relationships with different cultural groups, partnership in the Philippines, all kinds of things, the Samoan brothers and sisters in the UCC we worship with and shared God's house with. But we also formed a deep and meaningful relationship with the Ohlone people, especially through Karina Gold and Janella Rose. It started the first year of the Shell Mound Walk. We hosted Shell Mound Walkers overnight in the sanctuary, and it grew to be a very tender time. And in fact, they used to plan the annual walk so it would go through South Hayward so they could stay at UCH. So we knew the last time for all of us to be doing this together, we wanted to make it special. And again, I can't remember whose idea it was, but what rose was that in addition to being welcoming and sharing a meal together, providing housing and accommodations, praying together, that we were really mindful that these people had been walking and their bodies would be tired and their bodies would be sore. And so we got this idea to turn the pastor's study into kind of a pedicure parlor. We dimmed the lights, we played soothing spiritual music. People in the church donated big tubs to use for soaking feet in. We collected wonderful spa materials for feet. Other members of the church brought towels that we could use that evening. Some other folks went out and bought brand new socks so that everybody who got a foot treatment could get a fresh pair of socks. We had some friends who were masseuses who came to give foot and shoulder massages. I'm pretty sure that the Reiki people did some healing touch. And we just created this holy healing zone for the walkers to come and to rest. I was in there foot washing. I was on foot washing duty. And I got to wash the feet of activists I'd known for years. People, some had come from other countries. Some had come from the Buddhist group that Junsan had been bringing over to walk every year. Others were Native American leaders. Others were just kind of free spirits who wanted to be a part of that solidarity work. And as I was washing the feet of one of the Buddhist monks, I was really overcome with what it must have been like for Jesus to wash the feet of his disciples. And that leadership truly is about humbling ourselves, being present, being mindful of the needs of the people around us, and then doing whatever it is we can. And that memory of that night in particular, of being in solidarity, of coming deeply from our Christian faith, doing something that was part of our Christian story to bring comfort to people who were undoing some of the ravages of how our Christianity played out in this land, to me felt like very holy work and a game changer in a way that we'll never fully understand. So you need to know that in the years since, I've worked with different churches, sometimes for a weekend, sometimes for years. I hope this new church I'll be with for a long time. But inevitably, there comes a time in my ministry where I hear the can'ts. Somebody will say, well, we can't do that because we're not big enough, or we can't do that because we don't have enough money, or we can't do that because we don't have young enough people, or we can't do that because. And after I hear the cantation, I usually dig down into my pouch and tell a story. And I would say about 4 times out of 5, that story comes from United Church of Hayward. I might tell them one of the 3 stories I just told you today or something else, but I remind them that being Christ's living church has nothing at all to do with things you can measure, with things that can rust and rot. And it has everything to do with having the heart of Jesus Christ. A heart and a mind that is open to understanding the world and its situations, a spirit that is willing to be vulnerable and to be led into a very moment when who you are is absolutely enough. And so thank you, United Church of Hayward, for teaching me so much about being the living church. I'm so grateful for our 10 years together. I celebrate with you this wonderful achievement of 60, and of course I'm remembering the 50th when we had a few little celebrations of our own. I wish you all the best, and I look forward to the Sunday coming up in the future. Jeannie and I have talked. We're going to pick a Sunday when neither one of our churches has an after-church meeting. We'll get together somewhere for a meal, and on that day, I will get to hear your stories, and I'll get to meet some of you who have come to this church in the years since I had the honor to serve. May God be with you. May God bless you. And happy 60th. Bye, y'all. Bye-bye.